Go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us today for the webinar on the Second Chance Act Juvenile Reentry Planning and Demonstration Project Solicitation. My name is Leah Kane, and I'm with the National Reentry Resource Center, which is a project of the Council of State Governments Justice Center. The National Reentry Resource Center is the designated training and technical assistance provider for the Second Chance Act grantees, and we launched in 2009 thanks to support from the U.S. Department of Justice. We are very fortunate today to be joined by Tom Murphy, the Juvenile Reentry Program Manager with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention in the U.S. Department of Justice. Before I turn it over to Tom, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about the format of today's webinar. First of all, today's webinar focuses specifically on the OJJDP solicitation for juvenile offender reentry planning and demonstration projects, which was released on June 10th. Any other Second Chance Act solicitations have been released by BJA and OJJDP this spring, and we have hosted and recorded webinars on many of them. If you are looking for information about any other Second Chance Act grant programs, please go to the National Reentry Resource Center website, which is www.nationalreentryresourcecenter.org, and click on Second Chance Act. After Tom's presentation, we will have lots of time today for questions and answers. If you think of any questions along the way during the presentation today, please type your question into the Q&A panel that appears on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible at the very end of the webinar. Unfortunately, you may encounter technical or audio problems during today's webinar. There'll be some technical issues that we may not be able to resolve in time for you to participate in today's webinar. They may arise either because of connect problems, firewall problems, or any number of other issues that might arise. You can also reach WebEx Technical Support. WebEx is the company that runs the platform that we use for our webinars. You can reach technical support at 866-293239. However, because there are some technical issues we may not be able to resolve, we are recording the event and post the recording of the webinar before the end of this week. And for all you who have registered for today's webinar, you will be notified by email when that recording is available. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Tom. And Tom, I've just flipped over to slide 3, the Second Chance Act of 2007.
Okay, thank you, Leah. As Leah said, my name is Tom Murphy. I am with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. We're one of 5 pieces within the Office of Justice Programs at the U.S. Department of Justice. As our name implies, we are the bureau that handles youth, adolescents, juvenile delinquency prevention, rehabilitation, corrections, as well as child victimization issues run through our office. And I am the Juvenile Reentry Program Manager. And I really just want to start by giving you guys a little background about the Second Chance Act of 2007, because this is a separate appropriation from the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So the appropriation is separate from what comes directly to us. Thus, it makes the appropriation process a little bit more complicated in how the money actually gets funneled down the juvenile side of reentry. But the Second Chance Act of 2007 was passed into law on April 8th of 2008, so it's relatively new. And we're giving funding out in federal fiscal year 2009. As well as 2010, there was authorized $165 million, including $55 million for state and local reentry demonstration projects for 2009 and 2010. What we have for us now is our 2011 appropriation. So this will be the third rendition of a third funding cycle that we will have dollars to give to various grantees throughout the country and the U.S. territories, as well as tribal nations. Next slide, Leah. As far as the fund status, just a rundown of the 2011 Omnibus Appropriations Bill. We had $100 million in the President's budget for the Second Chance Act for 2011. However, as you all know, with the appropriation process getting bogged down, budget issues, deficit issues, and the bottom line was that we had $83 million to spend for 2011 funding, and that's what part of this funding, of this solicitation is going to fund. As for fiscal year 2012, again, the President's budget has another $100 million in it for the Second Chance Act grant programs, but again, we don't know at this point. We don't have our appropriation for 2012, but we anticipate that we'll probably be getting, mostly getting less than $100 million, and probably coming again at $83 million. Just so that you know that the reauthorization of the Act is currently in progress, and Leah and the Council of State Governments and the Resource Center is on their website has all the information about what's going on the Hill regarding legislation of this sort. Now, I wanted to bring you back or talk to you about pretty much the Second Chance Act works, because it's there are several different sections that are part of the Second Chance Act, and what we are looking at today for this solicitation is funding under what we call Section 101. Next slide, Leah. Section 101 of the Act is for the state and local administration projects. There are also other monies that have been available also in fiscal year 2010 to deal with mentoring for both juvenile and adult offenders, reentry courts, looking at family-based substance abuse and mental health treatment in correctional facilities, looking at the correctional education systems in both the juvenile and the adult facility, as well as looking at or working with career technology training centers. And with all this, we have various federal partners working with us on the Second Chance Act, particularly the Department of Labor, Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Housing and Urban Development as well. Now, what I also said is that this money does not come down directly to the Department of Juvenile Justice. It comes down through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which is our sister program bureau that handles the adult side of corrections and criminal justice. So you may have applied for last year's funding, where we released a joint solicitation between BJA and OJJDP. That fairly well, although there was some confusion about under which section to apply for. So this year we decided to separate out the adult from the juvenile, and what we've got before us is basically a mirror image of the solicitation that was out on the street under BJA under the adult side. So we wanted to keep this as similar as possible. Same with the mentoring component. Even though those have both closed, there's been both a juvenile and an adult mentoring component to the Second Chance Act. But then again, this is Second Chance Act. This is Section 101. Eligible applicants are state agencies, local units of local government, as well as tribal communities within the states. We also talk about the 5 U.S. territories that also receive funding through the Office of Justice Programs. For active solicitations on our website, you see the website there. It's www.ojjdp.gov/funding. And for this particular solicitation, it was released, as Leah said, on June 10th. It closes on the 11th of July, and you must register with grants.gov prior to your application submission. And we urge you not to wait to the day of the solicitation due date to register with grants.gov, because it can take time. As you all know, in the electronic world, things can go down, things can go wrong, so we urge you not to wait to the last minute. We also apologize for only giving you 30 days to respond to the solicitation, but as I stated earlier, the appropriation process did not go as smoothly this year, as all of you know, and we were delayed by a month, not 2 months, in knowing exactly if we were going to get money or not. So instead of releasing certain solicitations and then applicants applying and then having to pull that solicitation, we decided to wait a while to see what we in the field. Also, this is a little different for us. We're doing this a two-tiered approach where you apply for either planning or demonstration projects, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And then this is a mirror image to what BJA is doing as well. Next slide, Leah. As far as you can apply for this particular Section 101, very clear in the Second Chance Act. It states territories and units of local government and federally recognized Native American tribes are eligible to apply under this program. There are other parts of the Act, as I talked about, in which nonprofits are eligible, but a nonprofit community faith-based organization cannot be the lead applicant for this section of the Act and for this solicitation. And then, again, applicants, you must adhere to all the eligibility requirements of the Second Chance Act, which are quite prescriptive and are also listed mainly as the 10 mandatory requirements of the Act. We'll talk about that, too, as well. We welcome joint applications. However, there can be one applicant, can be the lead or the primary applicant. The other one can be a fiduciary or secondary applicant, but again, we do welcome joint applications from prospective applicants. Next slide is the target population. For this particular solicitation and with the juvenile field in general, we're looking at medium to high-risk population of juvenile offenders confined to a secure confinement facility, and we define secure confinement facility to include a juvenile detention facility, a longer-term correctional facility, or a staff secure facility. And by staff secure, it could be a group home, it could be a foster care home, it could be a mental health facility, but it does not necessarily, we're not confining this just to juvenile detention and correctional facilities. It must be staff secure. The youth must have been confined prior to their 18th birthday to be eligible for this solicitation. Now, we obviously realize that the upper age of jurisdiction in most states extend beyond 18, but no cutoff date per se in the solicitation is how or when to stop serving these type of kids. But again, a kid can come into a facility at 17 and a half, 17 and 3/4, and be released after his 18th birthday, and you can serve that population as well. I mean, some states have can serve kids up to 24, some to 21. So we just want to make clear that just because a kid turns 18, you have to stop serving that youth in an entry setting or even a correctional setting. So that's come up a lot. It's come the mentoring side of things as well when we talk about the youth population. The population that we're not looking for to serve is those youth who could be under 18 who have been tried and convicted in the adult court and sent to an adult facility. They are considered to be adults, so again, they would be served by the adult system, and BJA would have had their solicitation out for that population. And within your application, you should justify your reason for selecting a certain target population, justify supporting your supporting documentation. Now, we also talk about the type of kid and from medium to high risk that you want to talk about that a little bit later, but we're not limiting it to, or we're excluding the juvenile sex offender from this population. As a matter of fact, we're looking to serve more sex offenders in the reentry setting on both the adult and the juvenile side, and we have our SMART office within OJP, which handles the Adam Walsh Act, is working with us on this initiative as well to see if we can provide some intensive technical assistance to applicants who are selected as a sex offender population. We only have like a handful of grantees that actually are serving that population, so we're looking to expand that set of youth offenders. Leah, the next slide on the 10 mandatory requirements. Read this slide, but as you can see, there's 10 mandatory requirements. These are verbatim from the solicitation. The most important thing we're looking at here is a reentry strategic plan, or the development of a reentry strategic plan as well. As you can look through this list, we're talking about the plan. We're talking about having a reentry task force in place. We're looking at having multiple partners in the the juvenile correctional system, community corrections, as well as other agencies, state, local, in mental health, child welfare, labor, housing, victim services, employment, and local law enforcement. So this is a fairly lengthy list that you need to address in your application. And again, all grantees have had to address these mandatory requirements haven't changed since these came in to play. So these are the same, and these are what the existing grantees now are their plans are being implemented in this fashion to address these issues. Now, the next slide, Leah. The Act is specific about priority considerations. When we go to peer review these solicitations, we take these priority areas into consideration when we get scored, focusing in specific geographic areas with disproportionate population of youth released from facilities. We talk about targeting higher risk offenders through the use of validated risk needs assessment tools. We also talk about, in the appendix, there's the 6 evidence-based strategies that are detailed, which talks about criminogenic needs, risk and needs assessments, effective case management, everything that goes into the entire reentry spectrum care upon release from a facility. There's also, if you are able to build in an independent evaluation of the reentry program, to the extent possible, to use random assignments at controlled cities to determine the effectiveness of such programs, that would priority consideration will be given to that, including the input from nonprofits and consultation with victims. And also the Act talks about working with those youth or offenders, ex-offenders who have actually been released from facilities, and also working intensely with their families as well. Talked about case management abilities, as well as, particularly on the juvenile side, make sure you implement and use a system of graduated sanctions responses to, and looking at and how you're dealing with the violations of parole and probation and supervision when youth are back out into the community. So again, look at graduated sanctions, which is at the front or at the heart of the juvenile justice field, is dealing swiftly and consistently with youth in various graduated sanction types of programming and supervision. Now, the slide, Leo, I'm going to talk about the categories. Again, we've got Category 1, supporting planning projects, and Category 2, which would support implementation projects. Projects would be for a 12-month period, which is, again, prescriptive to how the Second Chance Act is worded, is that they're for 12-month periods. Now let me to the planning grants that looking at to do. And again, this mirrors the adult side. We're wanting to provide up to $50,000 for a 12-month period for planning projects, and this is to if you're getting your reentry task force off the ground, this would probably and don't have necessarily all the players that you need at the table. You've got the beginnings of a strategic reentry plan that is being started. You're ready to get get off the ground as well. You just don't know exactly where you're going at this point with the implementation of the Reentry Task Force and the plan, and also to assist you in developing evidence-based methodology to be used in the implementation of your project and measuring the outcomes of your project as well. Next slide, Leah. This group of grantees will be receiving intensive technical assistance through the Council of State Governments, the National Reentry Resource Center, to assist you in your planning process. And if selected within that 12 months, you'll be required to complete a planning and implementation guide with assistance through the Council of State Governments, and then you will receive additional resources for the implementation of the project. Again, and this will be depend on the availability of funds come next year, which is fiscal year 2012. So again, these grantees will who are again just getting off the ground or in the very beginning stages of implementing a reentry strategic plan and forming your task force at your state or local level. On the implementation projects, category 2, they're going to be up to $750,000 for 12-month periods, again for 1 year, and you'll see allowable uses for this. The implementation projects are for applicants who've already been doing a lot of work in reentry, have got their task force in place, have gotten that they're working on, are utilizing state funds to begin really seeing this initiative of reducing recidivism, protecting public safety upon release to the community. And again, we talk about needing to provide a comprehensive range of services, from cognitive behavioral therapy to literacy, vocational training, educational training, job placement, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, housing placement, as well as physical health care services like healthcare services as well, and then looking at family and providing intensive services for the family unit, and then again, mentoring comes in here as well for this, looking at probably including a mentoring component in the overall strategy that you've got. And some of these folks may already be doing a lot of these, some of these, and ready to move forward with the implementation. But again, it's you can apply for one or two of these areas, but you can't apply for both. So again, it's either one or two. The next slide, Leah, we're just going to talk about the matching requirements, since again, the Second Chance Act is very prescriptive in the amount of match that is required for this type of program. Again, 50% match is required for the total cost of the project being funded, and the way it reads is that 25% of that 50% match has to be cash, 25% can be in kind. We're looking for you to supplement, not supplant, non-federal funds. And budget detail, which we'll talk just briefly about how that's going to be scored, to identify your source of non-federal of the non-federal cash portion of the budget, which would be your 25%. And in your budget, you're also going to need to differentiate between the match when you put that budget between cash and in-kind match. Now, next slide, Leah, we'll talk about there is a match waiver section of the Act that says Attorney General can waive the 25% cash portion match requirement upon a determination of fiscal hardships at the interlocal level. And the way you do that is by including a letter as an attachment in your application. Generally, folks last year either did it from the Chief Executive Officer, the Governor, or the Executive Officer of the county and tribe, or Terry, or somebody when the chief financial office within your fiscal person who can actually spell out and can say what hardships that you are seeing at the state and local level, and realize because we realize that this is a high match requirement, and I believe they are looking at that match requirement in the reauthorization of the Act. But right now, we have to go by what the Act says since it's law. And I can say that last year, a good portion of the applicants did request a waiver of this cash match requirement. And as far as I know, on both the juvenile and the adult side, they were granted in the application process. In the grant award process, and in which applicants still would have to come up with a 50% match. It can be an all-in-kind match. So that is a good thing. And again, most of the states came through with that letter as an attachment. And here we can talk some fiscal hardships. We all know that is at the state and local levels of government, with those layoffs, reductions in corrections budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So we are aware of this match requirement. Now, as far as how you go about applying, it's spelled out pretty well in the application. Again, I'm on slide 16. You do, again, up through grants.gov, get all your registration, and there's a whole list on page 15 and 16 on how you go about doing that. Acquiring a DUNS number is essentially an Office of Management and Budget, a universal numbering system number that is unique to you as an applicant and as a grantee. There are several folks you can get in touch when you're applying for these applications as far as assistance with technical difficulties. The first place is the grants.gov customer service hotline. The number is 800-518-4726. It's my understanding it's open 24/7 except for federal holidays. And that's generally if you're having difficulties in getting registered in grants.gov and so forth, and if you're having difficulties in actually submitting your application when the time comes to submit the application. Thought is what to include, and for those of you who have done any federal grants, not just justice, we have the standard form, the SF-424, which pretty much gives us everything we need to know about your organization, your vendor ID number, the amount of money that you're requesting, the signature authority who can sign off on the awards, who we need to contact in the event we get more information from you during the peer review process or during the grant making process as well. We ask that all applicants submit to us a project abstract. I believe it's like 200 words or less. If I'm mistaken, but it just helps us. Actually have a page number restriction here, but just a paragraph or two on a synopsis of your project. And the meat of your project is going to be within your program narrative. And this is how, under program narrative, these are the criteria in which the peer review folks will review your applications, starting with the statement of the problem, your project design and implementation, your capabilities and competencies as an organization, looking at outcomes, evaluation, sustainability, and performance measures, your ability to collaborate with the other agencies, as I discussed earlier. And then the section that we're going to gore you on, obviously, will be your budget detail worksheet and your budget narrative. And I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these sections when I talk about criteria. They're slightly different and slightly weighted different for planning and the implementation grants. But on the slide, there's just additional attachments which you can apply, and you can use these attachments. Don't go towards page limit. I believe we got a page limit on the narrative of 30 pages. We don't want you to write any more than 30 pages. But then again, the attachments can be unlimited, so we end up reading a lot of attachments anyway. So we get the project timeline. Again, this will be for a year, so you would have a 12-month project timeline. Position descriptions for each of the positions that you have described in your grant application, and then that would be state or local positions. And a lot of folks will also be contracting out services as well. If you've ever reentry plan in place, go attach it to your application. And also letters of support are good to have, and particularly if you are doing a joint application, it's behoove you to have to make sure you've got those a letter of support at least from your other primary partner as well. But letters of support can't hurt if you can get them before the application is due. They're great to have, but it's critical and necessary if you're filing a joint application. Next slide, I'm just going to briefly talk about the selection criteria. Again, this is going to be how you are going to be scored by our external peer reviewers, which will be professionals in the field from across disciplines, from justice to labor, to Department of Education, to nonprofits, to community-based organizations, to folks in corrections. So actually right now we are going through, we're in the process of actually selecting those peer reviewers that are going to be peer reviewing this proposals when they come in. And this is all stated in the solicitation, but planning, again, the statement problem will be 20% of your score. The next slide under capabilities and competencies, we're looking at 20%. And here we're looking at to see how the structure of your organization or department or agency, I should say. And here's where you talk about your project timeline and so forth. And also having any potential barriers you can do to the implementation and how you anticipate to overcome them as well. The next criteria we will be looking about is 15% of your score, which will be the whole impact, evaluation, sustainability, and performance measures. And here you describe if you anticipate, particularly on the implementation side, you're going to look at an evaluation and so forth, and building up collaborative partnerships and so forth. So again, this is 15% of your score on the planning. And performance measures just goes into a little bit more detail about what we're looking for. We'll really want you to measure if you get a grant award. So these are something you really need to take a look at. But obviously, we're not asking you can't measure these just yet. But these are the areas that you need to talk about in your application that you'll begin collecting information on, and also in this solicitation on, I believe, there's a section on performance measures and what we're looking for you to collect. I believe that's on page 14, well, 13 and 14, 11 to 14, about what we're looking for you to collect as well. Planning, added under plan grants. We'll talk about the budget and what we're looking for at the end, because both the budgets for both the planning and implementation are the same. For the implementation projects, pretty much the same thing we're looking at, except we're only scoring this at 10%, for weighting this at 10% of the overall. Again, we're looking at a good description of what your problem is in your jurisdiction or in your state, and what's going currently in the reentry process, or your reentry strategies in your state. The next project design and implementation is weighted at 30%, and here's where we want you to talk about the 10 mandatory requirements, and also any aspects of the priority considerations that you can fulfill with your application. So talks about approved uses that you can use when you're describing your project. So again, project design and implementation is a good chunk of the application process. The next criteria would be the impact evaluation of sustainability and performance measures. The same thing on that one as well. Performance measures here, what we're looking at. Again, we're looking at to reduce, obviously we're looking at to reduce recidivism and to increase public safety. On the juvenile side, we're also look at percentage increases in positive behavior outcomes, both while incarcerated and in the field, increased GED attainment, and so forth, and as well as increased positive social behaviors in mental health, substance abuse, dealing with family issues as well. And let me see, I just want to go down to on slide 29, if you're still following me. The Plantation Projects has a separate section on collaboration, which is 10%. Again, the Second Chance Act is very prescriptive in making sure that all the partners are at the table for that represent all the multiple disciplines that represent reentry are at the table with you. So we will again on the implementation projects take a good look at who got at the table along with you with the project. With your project. For both the planning and the implementation, it's coming in at 10%. And I'd tell you, we take a look at when the peer review take a look at the budget, they really just take a cursory look at the budget, make sure that it's reasonable, the costs are allowable. But what you need to be really careful for is that you put in that matching requirement that is needed. That's required for the Second Chance Act. So the peers are going to be looking at that. They're going to be looking at your waiver request if it's there to make sure that it's part of it. If it's not, then you have to maybe come up with this 25% cash, 25% in kind. And that's much it on the budget. Again, both of that will be 10%. And also for folks make it through score enough on peer review and are granted an award. Generally, the budgets will not have been clear by the time you have an award. We at the Office of Justice Program have our Office of the Chief Financial Officer section take a much closer look at your budget before you can actually touch any of the money that you may be awarded. So. It's good to make sure you've got a financial folks on your team who are writing these grants who know how to work budgets, know how to calculate the budgets, know how to justify your budget categories, and know how to come up with the match. So again, and that is the quicker that you will get your budget cleared once you get an award. That I believe I've gone through pretty much the whole solicitation in a nutshell. The contact information, as I say, we've got a lot of technical assistance available for you. I know if you've already taken advantage of the Justice Information Center, which is our new TA provider. All of the Office of Justice Programs solicitations, all the questions get fielded to this information center, which I know you have taken advantage of because I've gotten some questions coming through. So these are available from 8:30 to 5 Eastern Time, and they're all open late on the night of the solicitation until 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the date that the solicitation closes. But then again, by that time you should have had all of your solicitation questions answered, hopefully, and you will just have technical assistance questions, which again through the grants.gov customer service support hotline as well. And yes, we can open it up for questions and answers. I've gone through it fairly quickly. I believe this is just an hour, so we've got 15 minutes for questions.
Yep.
So I'll turn it over to Leah. Okay.
Of questions in the queue, but if there's anybody out there with questions and you haven't submitted it through the Q&A box yet, you still have a few minutes to do that. Tom, let me start with a question about the match requirement. That match requirement applies to both planning and demonstration grants, correct?
Yes.
Then I want to make sure we got to know about the match waiver and how that works, and so I'm going to try to summarize what I know about this and correct me if I'm wrong. But so if you apply for the waiver to the match, what happens is your 25% cash match turns into a 25% in-kind match, right? So
yes, that's correct.
You still have to provide a 50% match, but the entire match can be in-kind.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you have any guidance for folks about what counts as an in-kind match versus a cash match? So, for example, should they consider staff time or office space to be a kind match as opposed to a cash match?
Yeah, that would be in kind.
Okay.
But I mean, folks who do budgets and at the state and local level know pretty much what an in kind and cash is. I believe cash is more just hard cash with personnel time and so forth. But we're talking about office space and other goods and commodities that can all be in kind. And that's what the successful grantees have done last year.
For the folks who are nonprofit organizations who are on the webinar, it's true that they can be either sub-grantees or contractors, right? They just can't be the primary applicant.
That's correct.
Under this program. Okay.
On Section 101. As mentoring side, nonprofits can apply.
Right. And for folks who want more information about the mentoring grant program, I would suggest you take a look at our website, the National Reentry Resource Center.org website. I have links to both solicitations. Unfortunately, both mentoring solicitations,
right,
both on the adult and juvenile side, have already closed this year. But you can take a look and see that the mentoring grant program is the main funding opportunity for nonprofit organizations under the Second Chance Act. So if you take a look at our website, we provide more information and links to the FY11 solicitations for both programs. And you can also sign up on our website for our newsletter, through which you'll receive announcements whenever new Second Chance Act solicitations come out. Tom, is there a minimum amount that a juvenile must be detained in order for them to participate in a Second Chance Act program?
There is not a minimum, no.
Okay. Can funds be used for either planning or providing services to youth that have been diverted from incarceration or for alternatives to incarceration, or do they need to be working with juveniles who have been committed care?
Yes. I mean, the Second Chance Act is pretty clear that these are offenders who have been incarcerated or confined in some way. By diverting kids out of place, I mean, if they've never been in custody, then they wouldn't be eligible for this type of program, for this, at least Section 101 of the Act. And
what I'll tell folks is that Tom mentioned earlier the effort to authorize the Second Chance Act, and a reauthorization bill was just introduced in Congress last week, I believe, which does include some increased funding for alternatives to incarceration and diversion programs.
Oh, it does. Okay.
But the bill as currently written is focused entirely on folks who have been sentenced or in the juvenile world committed to out-of-home placement. Grant funds be used for validating a risk assessment. So if you're a correction system and you'd like to bring in a new risk assessment tool and pay for it to be validated, can they use that with grant funds, or do they need to do that separately?
Which would have to bring a researcher on board?
Mostly, or they'd be paying for an internal research department to undertake the research. Right. So they bringing in contractors probably to bring the assessment tool online, and then they would be paying for the research to have the validation process.
Yeah, that would be a little use.
Okay. And so this is a 12-month grant program, so it'll start, the grant funds basically become available on October 1st, or as soon as your budget is cleared after that, and would go through September 30th of 2012. Can you give folks a sense of what the possibility is for either an extension or for future funding if they become a grantee in 2011?
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, generally, we're dealing with this with the 2010 grantees as we speak. Although the awards were made October 1st, and they were actually a little ahead of you guys as far as getting announced. A lot of them didn't get actually their funding until I'm going to say December or January. So a lot of them have come in for grant extensions, but also open up additional money for those who want to apply for continuation funding for fiscal year 2011. So I anticipate, again, it all depends on the appropriations and how much money actually makes it to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. But I would anticipate looking at a similar scenario with the fiscal year 2012, in particular with looking at the anticipated number of planning grantees who would be looking for additional funding as well. But the first year funding just beyond just straight 12-month period and can be stretched out to maybe 18 months if not. But again, that's something that we're looking at. We're currently working with the 20 grantees with, and we'll be staying with you come this time next year.
So clear that there may, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's clear that there may be some additional funding available for these grantees, but that it'll be available on a competitive basis.
Competitive for continuation?
Yeah.
Well, it would be competitive amongst the existing grantees. You wouldn't necessarily, if you got an award this year, you wouldn't have to compete against the whole world. So you only have to compete against the juvenile grantees that were awarded. But that would give you a much bigger opportunity.
Yeah.
And we're doing things a little differently in that way with than BJA, but since you're all on the call for the juveniles, for the juvenile applications or the juvenile pot of money, that's going on our side.
Well, I think that exhausts all the questions, at least that I've seen come in. I'm going to give people just another minute or two in case you have any last-minute questions, and I'll just give you some reminders. As I said at the beginning, we will send out an email to you when the recording of today's webinar is available online. Please look at our website. There are two things that are going to pop up on your screen after you leave today's webinar. The first is the National Reentry Resource Center website. We provided the link to in the chat box. And if you haven't already, please go to the website and sign up for our National Reentry Resource Center newsletter list. That we send out a monthly newsletter that provides a lot of information about the latest resources in reentry, but that's also how we announce new Second Chance Act funding opportunities. So we send an announcement whenever a new solicitation comes online. The second thing that's going to pop up is a brief survey about today's webinar. We'd very much appreciate any feedback you have to give us about today's webinar. And I haven't seen any additional questions come in, so I'm hoping that everybody has had their questions answered. If not, I'll leave up this contact information screen for another minute or two so you can take down that information if you need to.
Yes, is that slide 31, Leah?
Right.
Yeah, okay, because I was going to say that the Justice Information Center is available, as I said, for any questions regarding the solicitation. They can answer those as well. Great.
Well, thank you all for participating in our webinar today. Thanks very much to Tom Murphy and OJJDP for sponsoring and participating in today's webinar. We hope you got a lot out of it and look for applications.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
thanks over there for putting this all together. It's great with you guys. Project. All right, thank you all.